If you do a comparison shot of different times of day in Tears of the Kingdom, and you look up at the sky, you will notice something very interesting. Depending on what the skybox is doing, the visibility of the islands in the sky waxes and wanes. Now, if you think about it for 2 seconds, you'll sort of go, well, yeah, duh. If there's clouds, the clouds will cover the islands, and therefore the islands will not be visible, right? And that is true. In Tears of the Kingdom, that does happen, but something else also happens. Your local weatherman would call the shot on the left here partly cloudy skies, mostly sunny, almost a clear day. And yet that's the one where the islands in the sky are not as visible. You can see the floating islands in the sky better when there are more clouds in front of them. What is that about? Now, this isn't universally true. There are times when it'll be clear skies and you can see the islands, and times when it's cloudy skies and you can't. But it's interesting that it can be either way. And this is just one of many ways that the skybox in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom controls what you do. And that is a big part of what we are going to be discussing on today's episode of Skybox Appreciation. So what is a skybox if you've never heard of one? A skybox is, in effect, a flat painted surface that is projected into the sky of a video game that gives the illusion that it's an open sky. Back in the day, they were like big cubes with skies on them. But for our purposes, we tend to think of skyboxes as just anything that is sort of unreachable, out of bounds, in the distance, in the sky, etc. So the first skybox that we're really going to look at today are these sunrises and sunsets. In Tears of the Kingdom, they are gorgeous. Jacob Geller recently put out this unbelievably good video about the role that sort of ascent and the symbolic position of the sky plays in a game like Tears of the Kingdom or plays in a game like The Last Guardian. He draws this beautiful comparison between the critical reception of Impressionist painting, which was very negative at the time. People said, it just looks like garbage. Why are you painting badly? I don't get it. And Tears of the Kingdom's graphics being sort of technically bad, you know. Now, the underlying point of that is just Tears of the Kingdom is a stunningly beautiful game. It's only when you look at it through this technical lens that it then takes on the costume of being an ugly game, right? Sure. Anyway, so the sunrises and sunset in Tears of the Kingdom are unbelievable. They are, every single time they happen, if you have a shred of human soul, you will stop and you will look at them. You won't have a choice. Your eyes will go straight out to them every time. There's a sort of instantaneous yearning that comes with seeing that part of the day. It immediately and cohesively kind of narrativizes whatever moment is happening in the game, no matter how silly the thing you're doing is, whether you're picking up a Korok or whether you're fighting a boss. If that thing should happen when the sun is rising or setting, it just makes everything feel right, you know? This happens in movies and in real life also. Now, by contrast, notice where your eyes go when the game shifts to Overcast or shifts to rain. No longer is there anything to see in the distance, so far as even if you're watching a sunrise, if that overcast comes, it will completely obscure your ability to even see the impression of the sun. The overcast totally shrinks your field of attention to be what you're doing right now in front of you on the ground on your feet, which immediately establishes this dynamic of moments where you're sort of looking into the distance, sort of forward thinking, and then moments where you're just like sitting grounded, crucifying Koroks and like, you know, throwing apples at goblins or whatever you do in this game. I have never played it. Could you imagine if I was making this whole video and I never played it? That's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to start making video game essays about games I've never played. Now, where this goes from being, I think, a coincidence to being beautiful is in one of the big differences between this game and its predecessor. A large part of the marketing for Tears of the Kingdom focused on this Sky Islands area, this big domain that floats above the overworld full of islands and things to do, interesting things to look at and go explore, right? But notice something interesting. When the sky is overcast, it doesn't just obscure the horizon, it also literally disappears most of the sky islands other than teeny tiny little impressions of them. Now what this does in theory is it subtly influences you to go from one thing to another without your consent. There is no objective markers. There is no notification that something new has happened. It is not this big positive sort of reinforcement of a new activity. It's these really subtle shifts in what the sky is doing that changes where your focus is and maybe makes you think, I ought to head out that way, or maybe I should focus on what's going on in front of me, or wow, what's that sky island up there? I've got half a mind to think that this was an accident, given this sort of multifaceted and complex nature of art. Not that it really matters. I'm not overly invested in the idea that the intention of the artist is all that important. But if you listen to how the developers of Breath of the Wild spoke about the way that they carefully crafted sight lines in order to sort of innately or non-verbally guide you towards doing a variety of different things, it doesn't seem that far-fetched to think that they considered the role that the sky plays in what you're looking at and where you're going, right? So when you start to dig into what are those subtle little things that make a game from Nintendo, there's other people that do it a little bit on different scales, but Nintendo in particular does have a real knack for weaving the language of its video games like way into the subconscious, you know? And I just lost my whole train of thought. This is what happens when you just make these up on the fly. Oh well, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's beautiful the way that this stuff all comes together. And it's very different, and you can feel it, but you feel it really subconsciously when you play this game versus a game that doesn't pay attention to these sort of subtle background elements in detail, right? Now, watch this. Because you still think, okay, great, you think that they're crazy geniuses who made the sky dance in a way to sort of puppeteer you through the world. It's a little far-fetched. Isn't it possible that they just had sunrises and sunsets and they behave like sunrises and sunsets because that's how they work? It's possible. But have you ever paid attention to the weather patterns in Tears of the Kingdom? Have you ever paid attention to the way the wind blows, the frequency with which rain comes and goes, the frequency with which clouds, blankets versus go away? It's completely insane. There are videos on YouTube of people who've time-lapsed like a day in Breath of the Wild, and the clouds are going all over the place. They're coming, they're going up and down and left and right. It's going to rain, and then it stops raining, and then it's thundering, and then it stops thundering. If the goal was to mimic the weather patterns of Earth, planet name of Earth, in order to create this like really, oh, it's immersive and it's realistic, etc. experience, they did a very bad job. When you're playing the game, I think a lot of people would agree, it can feel really sort of random and frantic how quickly rain will just come and go. And that was a big complaint people had about Breath of the Wild, right? It was annoying. But if you consider it in the context of the way that it then guides the player to pay attention to different things, it makes perfect sense. And that to me is like a proper clue that they really thought about this shit, you know? This is deep. This is in their veins. Now, we'll talk more about the weather, the inclement weather skyboxes later, but for now, I do want to pay lip service to just the sort of emotional tone of the skies in Breath of the Wild, because it's really interesting. I've spoken briefly on, I think it was in one of the Patreon check-in podcasts, I was talking about Breath of the Wild and the way that it was so interesting because it didn't feel like a real open world terrestrial space. It felt sort of like playing in a giant action figure playset. There's this weird, slightly surreal feeling to it. And I think a part of that does have to do with the way that the skies work and look. Because there are some really deeply touching moments that you can have when a little piano thing will play right at the time that you sort of turn the camera and look out over a vista while the nighttime, sun is doing what it's doing, or the moon or whatever is the one that's at night. And in those moments, I always feel a really strange feeling of not like being watched, but sort of like the sky kind of feels like a parent who sent their kids to college and they're not intervening with their life, but they're sort of out there watching their kids live in this tiny little play world that the kid thinks is the most important thing. All of the sort of relationships and the drama of being a college student. And the parent is just sort of out there in this much larger world, mountains spanning out into the distance and so on, sort of gently watching with a kind of sadness. And every once in a while, the kid calls home and sort of gets a little taste of that sadness. And that's kind of, I think, how it feels to me when I see the sky in Tears of the Kingdom. Wow, I might be thinking too hard. Anyway, but it's not. That's maybe not the perfect metaphor. And you guys can probably tell me if you sort of feel similarly when you look at the skies in Breath of the Wild, because it's extremely important that everyone's on the same page about how the sky in Tears of the Kingdom makes you feel. And I also really enjoy the way that this extremely beautiful skybox can kind of peek through the cracks at times, because this happens a lot in other open world games. You know, if you're sort of in a big city, the sky will sort of just peek through. Actually, this is also how real life works if you live in a city. The sky will just kind of peek through in little windows or in little between the skyscrapers in a way that kind of feels like someone like looking over you. Now, it'd be easy to take from this that I think that Tears of the Kingdom skyboxes are a remarkable feat of artistic creation, and I do think that, but not everything about the skyboxes in this game is good. A couple of big pet peeves for me that Tears of the Kingdom does. The main one is the inclement weather. So the rain in this game, horrible. It is the most like screen filter ass looking, just like change the color of the clouds and add a rain filter type thing. And I know that the game has like puddles that fill up in the rain and it's got lightning strikes, and that's all well and good. That does make it feel very tangible. But just in terms of the rain, I mean, look at this, for example. You can leap up over the rain clouds, which is cool. I like that they have sort of you've reached over the you've gotten over the rain itself. But if you look down, as you travel through all of this, there's not any clouds that the rain is coming from. You just get lower and then the filter sort of turns back on and the rain continues. And if you actually look up at the sky during these rainy sections, you'll notice that it is effectively just the same sky as all the rest of it, just sort of desaturated and mixed up a little bit. It doesn't actually change dramatically other than sort of a color shift, which is fine. That's how they made Mexico in Breaking Bad, and it worked. But if we're really digging into the nitty-gritty of skyboxes, I want my rain skyboxes and my rain effects to be a little stronger. You know what I'm saying? Snow is much the same. If you go to a snowy place, you can just see that it's just the same skybox, just colored differently with a bunch of snowflakes. Now, I do have to give it credit for the sound design, because I learned this when I was filming this video. If you listen, when you pull out the paraglider in the rain, you can actually hear the raindrops hitting the paraglider, which is a pretty fucking crazy tiny detail, but the sound design in this game is off the chain, so I guess I shouldn't put it past them. But listen to this. You can hear it when I take the paraglider off, how it goes away. Isn't that great? That's so good. Now, one of the other things that is kind of a pet peeve of mine is you've got, every time you go up to the sky realm where all these sky islands are, you get all these big puffy sort of cumulus clouds, and they are there every single time, at least as far as I can tell. There must be some sort of like, we're in the middle of a fight club of different climates, because the only way you have this kind of consistent cumulus sort of convective activity is to have those fronts just constantly embattling each other, coughing up clouds as though it's the blood spit out of their mouth when they get hit, you know. But what you'll find is that when you actually go from in that cloud realm and you dive down, if you watch those clouds, they just disappear when you get low enough. They're not real things, just like the rest of the clouds, just like the rain. They are illusions. And I'm fine with that. I'm not knocking the game too much, but I do prefer when things have a little bit more tangible consistency. That's all. It's a minor complaint. Now, there's a few other skies that come up in Breath of the Wild that, you know, it's a skybox appreciation, so we don't want to miss any of them. So let's rattle off some of those at the end here in a little list. First of all, the stars, nighttime stars, also not very good. Not my favorite star skybox in the world. Some Zelda games, like Majora's Mask, for example, have enough going on in the stars that sort of draws your attention in a way that makes you sort of wonder what's out there. Tears of the Kingdom's not really there. I just want to do a quick second shout out to that beautiful green glow that the sky can have, this wonderful blue-green gradient that you get so frequently at night. And also we can take one last look at this very dramatic green-yellow sunrise explosion thing, right? That's very good. Also, while I was filming some catch-up footage for this, there's a fucking rainbow. That's a skybox as well. Just wanted to mention that. Oh, there it goes. Bye. And then, of course, this is one a lot of people have mentioned, is the Raru's Blessing skybox. I love this one because it's one of the few moments in the year 2023 where we get a AAA game that has a giant abstract void as a level. You don't see that very often. That was very common in Mario 64, a bunch of other games, whatever. And of course, the other half of this game, which sort of by definition doesn't have a skybox, but it does have a skybox, which is the depths. The sky of the depths is, of course, the top of a giant underground cave, I guess is what it is. I'm not really sure. Cavern. And it's covered in this sort of murky, humid layer of stratiform clouds, much like we were talking about earlier. The depth does give us an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that in Tears of the Kingdom, you can just get up to anything you want as a result of the building mechanic. We can get high enough that we can actually see that layer that sits just below the ceiling of the depths, which is pretty cool. It's not a great skybox in its own right. It's not that fun to actually look at, but you do have to respect the vibe that it creates down there. And that's it for extraneous skyboxes in Tears of the Kingdom. Little side things that don't participate in that beautiful orchestration that I was talking about earlier. The question that's on my mind is, do you believe me? You know, every one of these skybox appreciation videos comes with an argument. In the Banjo-Kazooie one, for example, I argued that Banjo was visiting Rusty Bucket Bay. Banjo is visiting Rusty Bucket Bay. And in this one, I'm arguing that, in a sense, the sky in Tears of the Kingdom is an influence on your will if you play the game with a desire to be immersed, you know, assuming you're not listening to a podcast and eating cereal while you just teleport from shrine to shrine. So I wonder, do you believe me? Do you think that Tears of the Kingdom is that deeply and beautifully designed, or am I just yapping, as I love to do? I am yapping. I do love to yap. But I also might be right. And that's what I want to hear in the comments down below. Do you think I'm right? Did you enjoy this video? If you did, post a comment, because that lets me know that I'm making what you want to see, which is what I want to do, because I'm here to serve you. If you want to be here to serve me, you can go to patreon.com/any_Austin for $3 a month. You get access to my Patreon exclusive podcast where I talk about all sorts of things, including some of the stuff we talked about today. And last but certainly not least, in my free time, of course, I make a lot of music. I use that music in all my videos, so I've got another song for you today. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Skybox Appreciation, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.